This is the Reverend Dr. Gilberto Rosado. Dios le bendiga. Este es Reverendo Dr. Gilberto Rosado. Welcoming you to another broadcast. At this hour, we have our bilingual broadcast, our teaching in English and Spanish. So we ask that you be patient as we translate live on the fly between languages. Esta es la hora que damos la enseñanza en inglés y español y pedimos que tengas pues paciencia mientras que traduzcamos de un idioma al otro. Aproveche y aprende el otro idioma. While we're at it, you can learn the other language as well. Es un beneficio de sintonizarse con nuestro ministerio. It's a benefit, an added benefit I should add, of tuning in to our ministry. God bless you and welcome. Testing 1 2 3. Yes, testing that mic. It's okay, better now. God bless you and welcome to our teaching today. Today's interesting one, where like if they weren't all interesting, but today particularly we are still continuing our series in AI, using the AI because we're not afraid. I'm not as scared or afraid that to challenge what I believe. See, and I've never been afraid since the beginning of my encounter with, religious things. We'll put it that way. So I was never afraid. No one should be. Because, truth is truth. Jesus said it. This thing is settled. It's settled math. Settled. You shall know the truth. Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. That's it. Done. Finished. There's no stories here. There's no fantasy island. There's no, have faith and just believe it, even though it sounds crazy. This is not what Jesus was talking about. It's simply, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So, and you talk about a person like Jesus Christ who was standing against the religious philosophy or the religious views of his time, right? Of that time. But, depending on your belief, he was standing against the religious views of all time, all right? And it just so happens, yes, indeed, even from the beginning where God is, the beginning of the Torah, where God is, speaking with Moses from the mountain, he is making always an emphasis, that he is the true God. And we've done this study intensively at other times. But, this is the issue that Jehovah in the Bible is dealing with. He's dealing with the historical, polytheism, which does not identify the true God. This is the posit of the God of the Bible. The posit is that he is the true God, right? And so he refers to himself in the Bible, Elohim, which means gods. Well, why would God do that? Why would God say gods? This extrapolations, interpretations, this means this or that. The Jews, the Hebrews would say, what's this referring to his glory? And so he is glorious, and so therefore he says, things like we and gods and, so the Trinitarian Christian would say, well, this is the reference to the Trinity, because then there's Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So these are the gods of the Elohim, right? Which is one God, but having three, comprised of three equally deified, beings. And so that is that their interpretation of it. Another one is quite interesting, but actually more humanly applicative, and that is that God was eliminating the notion that there are other gods simply by saying, I am the guy you all been talking about. Whenever you talk about this one, the God of the sun, the God of the stars, the God of the night, the God of the day, the God of the river, the God of the moon, the God of the of fertility, the God of snakes, and the God of bears, and the God of the jungle, and the God of the city, and whatever have you, the God of the Carpenters Union, whatever have you. All of these Eloi is moi, is me, Jehovah, Elohim. So people confused the one true God with all these other pantheon of gods out there, because they don't understand what you should have done, or what will develop is an understanding of science, but that does not eliminate the one true God. So this is the stance of the Bible. The stance of the Bible actually is that God created heaven and earth, and therefore he created all the science. Science is not a threat to God, the one true God. It's only a threat to all the false gods, because then you begin to understand that these weren't gods. You guys were scared of nothing, only to come to the realization that God has been saying that from the beginning. The God of the Bible has, and also has identified himself as the God, period. So anyone who has prayed to God or a God or what have you, you had only one God to pray to. And there was only one God hearing, if at all. If a heart was sincere, there's only one God to hear. And a lot of people don't understand it, don't see it that way, because you're taught a lot of religious teachings, and everyone tries to portend or pretend that their religion is the true religion, it's the right religion, and so they give themselves some credibility by denouncing, making all of these other religious statements and beliefs that seem to lend credibility to what they're saying, to what they're teaching, the posits that they are upholding. Let me make sure that we're online everywhere that we need to be. Okay. We're available on chat, by the way, if anybody wants to ask a question. We're available on Kick, Chat, Twitch, Chat, and YouTube Chat, and also on Facebook. If you got us on Facebook, I do monitor the Facebook chat as well. So join in and let us hear if any questions you have or any statements, comments you want to make. I don't look at the chats often, but when I do, I'll catch up to your messages, and we'll deal with them at that time. So let's get going on our topic for today. Let's clear the screen a little bit, and let's get into the screen. So today we're asking the AI certain specific questions. As usual, some churches, there are some creeds that remain nameless right now that do not accept AI. Well, they don't like science even still today. They think the science is something that's against the church and all that. No, science is against ignorance. And AI is the same. AI it's not a thing. It doesn't have an agenda. It just simply looks for information. Now, it's true that what is true about AI is that it gives you information that's out there. What is out there? Information that is unbiased or scientific, and also biased information. So that is true. This is the reason why if you ask it a biased question, you'll get a biased answer, because simply part of the subset of resources are biased ones. But the funny thing about AI is that it's very good at estimation. It calculates, the weight of certain things. So if it has 100 documents that say one thing, and they're scientific, they're weighted documents, that means they have great high credibility, against a few websites that have some contrary ideas and things like that. So they get low grade because they're not mainstream documented scientific research papers. They're just comments on a blog. So the AI is able to distinguish that, and then to downgrade the importance or the weight of that information. So don't make a mistake. AI can make calculations. It is basically a calculator for ideas. Basically, if you want to look at AI in its most basic sense, it is a concept calculator. So it's able to take concepts and give them a rating, in terms of what is the credibility factor of this information. So it's able to tell you, well, this is not credible information. You give it something, you say, well, how's this or that? Well, that's not real credible concept, but we'll go through it if you like. The AI will say, you want to investigate this, but I'm telling you right off the bat that this idea that you want to get an answer about is not the mainstream. It doesn't have weighty factual science or research behind it. So it'll tell you that. Okay, but this is the reason that false religions would be afraid of AI, because the AI is going to tell it like it is. And then, again, like I said, you can ask the AI biased questions. You can lead it to give you the answers that you want. But the problem with that is that if you're posting it like on a video like I'm doing, other people can review it and say, wait a minute, the question you asked is incorrect, right? Or you are leading the question, like attorneys try to do in the court of law every day. They try to lead the witness. So people often, they ask questions that lead the witness. So you have to be careful. This is done we're talking about religion, so we're going to stay within religion. This is done in many churches all the time. They will give you questions. Like if you're in a church that already has questions in the material, so they're not promoting free thought. And okay, we'll give you, like math, that they give you some questions, okay, because some things need some guidance, right? But if there's no opportunity for free questioning, absolutely, you're being brainwashed. You have to understand that. There's certain things you have to understand before getting into any church or any religion, to make sure you don't get entangled in a false religion. Simply, you need free thinking. free thinking. When God created, when we're born, we're free thinkers. We're not given any guideline to think. And if you believe that God created man, then he created man to be a free thinker. We're not born with a rigidity of thinking processes. See, we're not given a list of questions to ask throughout life. If your church is giving you a list of questions to ask in Sunday school or Saturday school or Friday school, whatever school it is, then you are not in a free thinking environment. This is basic and simple. And like I said before, people are subjecting themselves to brainwashing, to mind control, because you're not thinking, you are not listening to people of capacity, of weight. I can say that. And you are not, you're not doing your own, pulling your own mental weight. You're not thinking. You're just accepting. It sounds good. Your girlfriend's in the church, or your boyfriend's in that church, or you were born into the church. Your family was in that church. So that's it. You're not thinking about it. You got used to it. It became part of your lifestyle. Some people have it as part of their culture. That is not truth. Again, what Jesus said. And you shall know the truth. He said it to a crowd of Jewish, right? Jewish, Judeo, Toraric believing audience. You shall, meaning they don't know it already, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So as simple as that. All right, so let's go in to a discussion of free thinking. Free thinkers are invited. Closed-minded thinkers are excused for the day. And so, what is the question we posed to the AI? Today we're going to talk a little bit about mainstream religion. Now, the question is there a God? Many people are asked this question, as opposed to saying, does God exist? Which I've also conclusively eradicated that thought in the seminar, Moving Beyond Atheism. Everyone needs to move beyond atheism. Atheism is not a thing anymore. Yes, there's people who believe, but there's also stupid people, right? So don't, it's stupid to say, well, there's still atheists, there's still dummies in the world too. It doesn't mean there's no education, right? So again, there's always going to be dumb. And they're stupid. They're stupid and dumb are two different things. They're two different types of folks. I would rather be stupid, because at least being stupid you can learn. But a dummy does not learn no matter what. So that's the difference. Okay. Now, so you're always going to have that type. But in terms of atheism, I already destroyed atheism in my 3-part seminar, which is now being reformatted into a documentary for film and for distribution. So that is in process. It's called Evidence for God. And that's going to go through all of the things that we discussed in our seminar, and in a more, in a more film type of manner. So it's more eye-engaging, but still thought-provoking, as the seminar is. Okay, so really, that seminar really just destroyed atheism totally, and its premise. Now, what you have after that, after an atheist can survive that seminar in my movie, then we're left with certain issues, are the only things that would be left. And that is then, why is it the God of the Bible? It doesn't need to be the God of the Bible? This is something that atheists ask all the time. Why does it have to be your God? And it's not a Hindu God. It's not a what do you call that? It's not a I forget the term they use on that one. Well, it's not a god of all the other types and the other cultures there are. A Persian, that's the one I was trying to think of. Persian, it's not a Persian god. It's not an Egyptian god. Why is it the God of the Bible, the Abrahamic God? Why does it have to be that God? Why is that the true God? So we're going to address this in this AI-powered research today, right here on your screen. Get your popcorn because it's going to get a little intense. Now, what you're going to find, like I said, we'll give you the warning again. AI and anyone can do their research and compare questions that are asked, but it's going to be pretty hard to defeat the questions that I pose, because you'll notice quickly that I pose questions that are mathematically embedded. Like I said, AI is more of a high fancied calculator, okay, at its basic takeaway. And so simply that's where it's strong. It's strong as a computer, and a computer, its biggest basic forte is calculations. It does everything about it. It's math, it's numbers, it's quick calculations. So if the question has some anchoring in calculating, weighing, and that type, that's why AI is great for analysis, then you have more truth than folly, than fiction or philosophy. So that's really where you want to pay attention to. Now let's look at the question. And you notice I pose questions. Don't judge me on the questions. The questions are made solely for the purpose of being fair and asking the right type of questions for the AI to give a fair and truthful result. Okay, so that's why the questions are framed that way. You have to say, what type of Christian asks that type of question? It's not a point here. What we're looking at is information, data. So it's not, this is not a religious, I'm not proposing a religious view. I'm analyzing a state or a situation, a scenario. And that's what we're looking at right here. Okay, so that being said, let's go on. Assuming that Islam is an offshoot of Bible-based Judeo-Christianity, what percentage of humanity would be followers and or influenced by the Torahric and New Testament God of the Bible? Okay, so you can see that question is loaded, right? The first thing is the word assuming, because the committee is still out on the origins of Islam. And that is because at this moment in time, a lot of information has surfaced and become more and more clear or proven now that Islam was forged from Christianity, or a combination, as Christianity is. It's not just Christianity, it's Judeo-Christianity. It has a Jewish base to it, right? And the Christianity is, again, an issue of history, an issue of timing, an experience within the Jewish community that expanded outward into the Gentile world. And after that, you see Islam rising after that. Now,
Islam, in its own holy book, refers to, looks back on, is premised upon Judeo-Christian teachings. The Bible, for example, is, or I should be more specific, the Torah is mentioned in Quran. The New Testament is referred to in the Quran by the word Injils, which means the Gospels. So the Quran is post Torah and post Injils, post New Testament. The Quran therefore refers, and by it referring to these works, therefore it is premised upon it, right? So it's taking, and it tells you, Islam itself, it tells you that those who follow Islam must believe in the Torah and in the Injils. So it's informing the followers of Islam that the Torah and the Injils are valid documents that should be believed in. Okay? So that's where therefore the Quran is taking authority or rooting itself within the Judeo-Christian tradition. There's a lot of more information. It has to do with what Muhammad actually is, or what it refers to. If you see and look at the research, you'll see that Muhammad was also a name referring to Messiah, to Jesus Christ, the Messiah. So Muhammad is not just Muhammad. Muhammad is with the vowels put into the Muhammad. But the Muhammad itself, without the vowels being arranged in a way to say Muhammad, the vowel-less writing of Muhammad also encompasses the word for Messiah in that language. So who is it really talking about? Again, we're not going to go into it today. We're not the ones leading in this research. Others are. But it's becoming more and more apparent that Islam, by these discoveries, is really an offshoot of Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, and obviously was twisted in many ways to form independently, or to develop over the years, centuries, as an independent, separate religious reality, when it originated as being another extension, if you will, of Judeo-Christianity. I'm not here to debate with anyone on that. Time will tell. Time will tell, but the information is pretty conclusive right now, pretty evident that is in fact what it is. And I've dealt with Muslims who have converted to Christianity for years now, and they have told me that they saw early on, before their conversions, they saw that the Quran was pointing towards the Judeo-Christian faith as a basis. And obviously you can't get away. They all talk about Abraham and all that. You can't get away from the fact that the Quran came after after Torah and after the Injils of Christianity. Okay, so we'll be being polite though. We say assuming. So we will assume that the Islamic religion is an extension, an offshoot, I don't think you can debate that, of the Judeo-Christian tradition. Simply the fact that the Quran mentions Jewish and Christian bases, the books, the Torah and Injils, it's a done deal. Okay, and so how has it, what percentage of humanity would be followers or not influenced by the Torah and New Testament God of the Bible? And why am I asking this? Why does this matter? Because if you run a company, and I'm going to ask you a question, you guys, because see, these questions have to do with reasoning. What is your reasoning skill level? How well do you reason? So again, we're not trying to answer the question, is there a God or not? We're trying to reason if there were. If there were, how would we tell with, God reaching out to man? For example, if there were a God, would he not, a God who created us and therefore was interested in our welfare, gave us a brain to think and reason, would he not try? Because we're looking for aliens. There's people saying there's aliens out there and they'll try to reach out and communicate. Well, why do you think that? So if you think that, then does it make sense? If we go to an island and we see some Indians there, or we call them Indians, or natives. You see natives there. Would you not try to communicate with them? Does that make sense? So if there's other creatures, even with a dog, we find a dog. Wouldn't you say, "Hey, doggy, come over, hey," and pet and feed him? Won't you try to have some type of rapport with even an animal, a parrot, a monkey, right? Even to have something to play with or pass the time while you're on an island. Okay, so if there is a God, wouldn't that God reach out to his own creation? Just to pass the time. I mean, eternity is a long time with no one to talk to. So even just on that basis, I think at the minimum, if there is a God, he would try to communicate, reach out. Okay. If there's a God, he would be as the God of the Bible is, right? Described. Would be the creator. I mean, what's your definition of God? If there is a God, wouldn't he have created the heavens and the earth? That would be a God, or else it would be a tyrant. A tyrant trying to pass off as God. But the Bible, the Bible does not speak of someone trying to take over in our part of the universe or anything. That's not the nature of what the Bible is showing. The Bible starts out, number one, A1, right off the bat, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And again, that means everything. That means all the universe. Just because it says heaven don't mean the sky. That's also called heaven there, right? Look up into the heavens. That the heavens are not the extent of what you can see. You can refer to it as that, but it really goes beyond what you can even see, right? So the Bible says heaven, but it means everything out there. So he created everything out there and everything down here. And there's still parts of the ocean that we have not gone into. We haven't yet to go into the center of the earth. We have not been there. We have not seen with our own eyes. Okay? Everything is hypothesis and measurements and calculations, and it should be like this. But we don't know, right? So that's even our own earth. So again, we are the ones that have a limited capacity of purview, right? But the Bible makes certain declarations. So these are the things that we have to understand. So again, no proof that there is a God. But if there were, what would God be good at? Reaching out to folks? I'm just asking. Would God be good at reaching his creation, influencing his creation. Let's use a word that we used. That we didn't use, but the AI brought it out. It was very interestingly. So I want you to pay notice to the little things, the little details like that. Pay notice to them. We'll get to it in a second. But the issue is that if there is a God, what would the impact of there being a God be with people? We're not going to talk about the universe or what is the impact. God, the Bible says it. God created it. So no matter how much you look at science, all you are looking at is what God made. It's simple. It doesn't prove anything, right? You're just proving that God, you're just saying that this machine works. But it says nothing about who created the machine or if it was created. We're not saying it was created. The Bible says it was created, right? The things themselves do not say they were created, do not indicate creation. How would you be able to tell that? We won't be able to tell that even if the things themselves manifested being created. How does that look like? Just and by a perfect God, right? Now, you can know things were created if they were imperfect. Because you see, look at this. This is stupid. We can clearly see when something is stupid. And you say, you see, this is stupid. There has to be a God. I mean, I think that most atheists are like looking for that. That's proof. See, this is a stupid thing. That's proof that there is a God. Okay. What do you expect? It's laughable when you think about what atheists expect. What do you expect to find? If there is a God, he is a perfect God. And he makes things, creates things perfectly. They're perfect. There's no sign in them. There's nothing in them to lead you to figure, hey, God made this. It's obvious. No. All you're going to find is perfect scientific, mathematical wonder. That's all you're going to see. And that's exactly what we see. Again, it's not a proof that there is a God. But if there is a God, that would be exactly what we would see. Simple. Doesn't disprove God. What atheists do is they don't give a weight to the fact that this also shows that there is a God, because the God would create it in this fashion, perfect. There's no way to tell, and no way for us to tell. And so that, at least this, we cannot use science. See, the minimal thing, we can't use science to deny we can use the science to deny the existence of God, yes. But we can't use science to say that there is no God. That can't be done. Because science itself is a product. If there is a God, science would be the product of that God. So he deserves an applause by all. And look at all those atheists who believe there is no God based on science. Way to go. Perfect. It's wonderful. Okay, so again. So what we do have, though, is again, if there is a God, there would be God attempting to reach out to man and to impact man. Now, and that's it. It doesn't, for reasons that the Bible shows us, there's no intention and no reason for God to appear to everyone. Say, hey, I'm God. I'm the old man upstairs. Okay, now you saw me. Now what? You're going to believe? Why isn't God doing that? Why wouldn't God do that? And so the answer is simple. Satan had that. The devil and the angels with him had that. They saw that. They've been there, done that. Okay? That is not the solution, because the devil and the angels, having view and access to the God of the Bible, they rebelled. See? So the fact is that a true belief in God has nothing to do with seeing God, if you will, in the flesh. Has nothing at all with that. Okay? Nothing at all. So that's something you shouldn't be believing on or thinking about or reasoning even. It shouldn't be reasoned at all. Sorry about that. I had to get this this pest out of my sight here. So you can't believe that. You can't reason in that fashion. You have to understand that, science is like the veil in the temple. It covers the eye. You can't see beyond. That's the limit of science. It is perfect. Everything looks wonderful, but you don't see behind the curtain. That's it. You got to understand that. The Bible already says that. The curious thing is funny. It's funny that the Bible already says all of this. Pretty interesting for cavemen to come out. I'm using terms that atheists use against the Bible and the people who wrote it. They say that the cavemen wrote this. But for cavemen, it's pretty astonishingly over the heads of most atheists. So this is the reality of what we have here. The Bible does show you why God doesn't just come out and show himself. It simply doesn't help. It wouldn't. And think about it. God still, a third of the angels in heaven fell with Lucifer, with Satan. And some people, that's not a true story. This, that, whatever. It's what it's teaching. It doesn't have to be in your judgment, because after all, that's what it is. A judgment that is not true. The fact is, what is it teaching? That's the main point. It doesn't matter what your judgment is. It's teaching that those that were with the God of the Bible, seeing him face to face or what have you, didn't help them to stay faithful, right? Because this is a different type of issue, and it's the issue that God is still dealing with, right? And why is God still dealing with this? Because it's an issue of perfection, and perfecting. Perfecting means is to make something perfect. Why would God be perfecting instead of just making things perfect? And the simple matter is because we're dealing with free will. It's the issue that the angels were made perfect. They weren't being perfected. They got tested. Right? So the perfecting of the angels was really not a perfecting of them, but a filtering of them, which is where we get Lucifer and the fall, and those who failed, being the fallen angels, they didn't pass the test. With us here, we are being perfected. And that means that as time goes on, the human race is getting more and more developed, more perfected in its ways. And it's a slow process. Some people refer to it as evolution, evolving, because evolution is nothing more than time-based development. Another word for development is perfection. If the end goal, if there's a goal, an intention, then it is perfecting through time. That's what evolution is. So if God had created the heaven and the earth, then he created evolution. Evolution is a time-based perfection engine, creating perfection through time. And that's the basis of our universe, and it's the basis of our existence. So that is why you have evolution. And that is why humanity goes through its struggles and its striving. And even in this whole grand debate of if God is God or there is no God and all of that's part of this process. It is not alien to it. So it is an issue of perfecting humanity, right, in the image and likeness of God, as God says so in Genesis, actually, when God made Adam in his image and likeness. So that is, again, God was stating story or truth. The concept is that he's stating the purpose, the goal, the high plateau of humanity. So that is what's there. And I speak in those terms, if a story or not, because people get tied up into, it's just a story, whatever they were taught, whatever they think, their opinion, and they automatically use opinions. It's still up an opinion. You weren't there. So they use the opinion as if it is the gospel fact. Oh, did I say gospel? I'm sorry. As if it was the facts. No, it's just your view. Your view is that it's just a story. And other people say it's the truth. It actually happened. It doesn't matter. What is the teaching? What is it teaching? Because that's always true. Okay? So, good. We confuse the point and obfuscate if it happened for real. If it didn't happen for real, what does it matter? Okay. So anyway, let's get back into what we're discussing. Okay, so if there is God, the point here is simple. If there is God, he would be communicating or reaching out to man. Now, how would he do that? And again, here we go. The atheists have been positing all of these things for the longest. They've been presenting these things as if they were cons against there being a God. Yet these same things that we're going to mention now just briefly are also what a God would do for the purposes that we've just described, in the manner in which we just described, hidden, evolving, development, not just come out here with all the blatant truth right out here, giving a college, a doctoral level discussion to a 2-year-old, which is basically where humanity is. Okay, so why didn't you just come out and you say it from the beginning? Because you're a caveman. Remember, cavemen wrote this. So what is a person who's uneducated going to understand? So we can't discuss things with an uneducated person. Have you ever tried that? I'm sure you have. It's nonsense to do that. You're trying to talk with them at their level. This is silly. It's silliness. People, you need to communicate with people at your level. You can't understand someone higher. That's why a lot of people don't watch me. And people who are lower than you, you tend to, what? Laugh? You understand? Or ignore completely. Now, you do ignore people who are higher than you, too. So ignoring somebody, it has nothing to do with their level. It just means that they're not at your level. That's for sure. They could be lower or they could be supremely higher than you. You ignore them. Okay, but someone at your level, you'll always engage. Someone at your level. So realize that. Next time you're engaging somebody, realize where you are. Because it really shows where you're at. All right, so here we have the answer from the AI to the question. If there's a God, though, he's reaching out. And the atheists like to point out, but these are myths. What's in Genesis was already said or stated. as if God came to town only after the Torah was written, as if God only communicated with man at the Mount, at the Holy Mount. When God gave Moses the Ten Commandments, that was the first time God communicated with man. This is the stupidity that's out there. It's amazing. It's amazing. When the Bible shows you, it shows you that since Adam, the first man, modern man, for you scientific buffs out there, God has been directly communicating with man. Directly communicating with man. God has been influencing human society since the modern man came into being. And I would tell you before that. But I'm not going to get into hypotheses here, because it would be hypothetical. It would be an hypothesis. There's no evidence for it, other than the things that people call science today. Just simply, it is the way things are. But how much of that is God communicating? How much of the basis of science, the reality, how much of reality of existence is actually a communication of God? How much of it actually transmits God-like reality to mankind? And we are interpreting, perceiving. So in the sense that science becomes our God. If you don't believe in God because of science, it's just simply you're believing in the science that is God. And that is what you have. It goes to another philosophical premise that I do teach about, is that we always need a God. We have a God. We have to have one because we're made in the form of a servant. We need God. Okay? It is built into the way we are. And it only is in relation to an entropic universe. I'm speaking scientifically now, so you know a little science. You'll understand what I mean by that. It's the scientific fact. And in an entropic universe, we are in an opposite reality right here. So it's a relational thing, but I'm not going to get into deal with scientific things right now. Simply, the God of the Bible, if he is, has always engaged man in insight, revelation, cognitive realization. Symbols of the things of nature are symbolic, aren't they? And leading the human race through its history, even before Moses penned Genesis 1, and those others who had a pen in there too. Okay, so these are not cons against there being a God. They're actually pro-God. The fact that there's anteceding information, stories, myths, as people call them and we call them, preceding the Bible, that are later in the Bible, does not preclude that the God of the Bible did not make those things occur or be part and parcel of the reason those myths began. Most myths began, scientists agree that most myths are based on some type of real event that happened. So they admit that something happened that made them say this story, and for this story to develop over time. All I'm saying is that the fact that they're in the Bible later, not all of them, but some of them, it gives credence to the original event. That's all we say. If there is a God, the God of the original event is the God of the Bible, and revisits or corrects the original event, or brings back the original event into the Bible. And for the purposes that we've already discussed. This is a big panorama here that people have to consider. You just can't look at the Bible and say, oh, there's antecedent myths. You can't do that, because the God of the Bible is not just the God in the Bible. It's the God who created the heavens and the earth. So you really have to start over there. Okay, so let's get back into the AI. So the AI answers the question, what percentage of humanity would be followers and or influenced by the Torahric and New Testament God of the Bible? AI responds, here's a breakdown of global religious affiliation. Let me blow this thing up here. One moment. Is this it here? We gotta... Yeah, okay. So I'll make this a little larger. That's not making it larger. Let me make the window a little larger for you guys. Okay, yeah. All right, let's get this a little larger so you can see that. All right, here's the breakdown of global religious affiliation. Notice what it says. I didn't say religious affiliation, right? But it's mentioned, but in terms of would be followers. Okay, so it's taking that first. Here's a breakdown of global religious affiliation that helps answer your question about the influence of the Torahric and New Testament God. Okay, so pay close attention to what it responded, how it responded, but also how it limited its response. So you have to understand why it did that. Now let's look at it. Followers of Abrahamic religions 2020 estimates. Okay, these religions trace their spiritual lineage to the God of Abraham as described in Torah and later in the New Testament. So it has three. These happen to be the three major religions in the entire world, and for that matter, in the entire solar system. And as far as we know, in the entire galaxy. And until we know anything further to contrary, that in the entire universe. Okay, so this is it. Now, we have Christianity global population share at 28.8%. 28.8% of people who state that they are Christian. Okay, and again, that is really dependent on how the questions were asked, right? So some of these polls are based on people who say yes to, are you a religious person? And before they keep going with the polling, you see, this is the issue. This happens in political polling as well. So if they come to me, now notice that I'm a Reverend Gilberto Rosado, right? Okay. You come to me and you ask me, are you religious? And I will tell you no. And I know many church pastors, many churches that would respond in the same fashion. No, we are not religious. We don't espouse religion. So in those calculations, you are automatically filtering out people who know better. You're filtering out people like us, or like myself, who understand that religion is man-made, and it's not what God wants for humanity. Religion is at best a stepping stone. It's on the way to step up to where the truth is, but it is not it's not a stop. It's not a place to stay, to rest at. It's a place to move on from. Okay? So most of us would say no to that question, and then we would not be counted in the group here in the percentage. So I would tell you right now that there's a far more number of people who are actually Christian in the world than 28.8%. But let's leave it like that. That's fine. I would tell you there's 30%, really, because I would think that like a 0.2% are people like myself who do not associate with religion. If you're asked, if I'm asked, I would tell them no. Okay, so let's give that 0.2%. That's the amount of Jews in the world, or people who practice Judaism in the world. You see that? It's a lot of people, a lot of folks, but it's really not a big number compared to the really large people who are religious Christians. So this is one of the points that I want to point out. Religious Christians are number 28.8%. Okay, they're directly based on New Testament and Hebrew Bible. And they would not count me in there unless they were seeing my videos. My viewers say, yeah, you are. You got the sign, you got the symbol, you're a Christian. Okay, so that's the only way that... But if they were asking me a poll, I would say I was not religious, because I don't espouse religion. And those who have watched the teachings for a while know that. You know that. Okay, so then it goes to Islam. A lot of people say, many atheists have this opinion that Islam is the biggest religion in the world. But the fact is that Islam was surpassed. There was a time where Islam was leading, but now it is no longer leading, and it's going to keep dwindling. Because the truth comes out. The truth is what's coming out, folks. So I expect this number to continue to dwindle. So Islam is right now at 25.6%. Respectable. It's lessening. It has lessened. But it's the second largest religion on the planet, in the universe. This recognizes Torah and Gospel as divine revelations, right? Though interpreted through the Quran. So that's basically what Islam is doing there. And then with Judaism, you have a 0.2%. Now that's rooted in Torah and foundational to both Christianity and Islam. So again, the question is Islam, what is Islam? It's not separate, because it is founded upon Judaism and on Christianity, on both, for the reasons I stated earlier. The AI is confirming that right now. Okay, and Christianity is still number one, the largest religious body in the entire universe, until you can bring me the alien and brings us the statistics otherwise. Now, total influence by the Torah and New Testament God is about 54.6% of humanity. It's still more than half, right? A little bit more, shaving more than half. So you have one part of humanity, mainly half, that is influenced by Torah and the New Testament God in terms of belief. That's what it was talking about. And you have the other half that is not. Now, this figure includes those who actively follow these faiths. If we also consider cultural, historical, and philosophical influence, especially in regions shaped by Judeo-Christian ethics, law, and literature, the percentage would be even higher. Now, this goes to the next question that I pose. But before I go there, you need to understand what it's telling you and why it's important. Remember what I said before, pre-Bible, that before the Bible, God was communicating with man. So that, and even with science itself, in other words, with nature, that God creates the heavens and earth. Do you understand something? Look in Genesis chapter 1. I'm going to show you something here. Let's look into the Bible. Hey, you don't show the Bible anymore, Pastor. What happened? Well, come on, look now. You got your glasses on. Did I didn't open up my... I have to open up my other app here one moment. And then let's look into the Bible. Open the Bible with me, Genesis 1:1. You can go ahead. Genesis chapter 1. Open up your Bible. And I'm just getting my software up and running. Running up the social evangelizer, folks. You're missing it. I'm telling you right now. You're missing all the good stuff. Okay, so the social evangelizer is what I use. Let's go to Studio 23, which is what I named it. All the good stuff here. Okay. Now we're going to go to, I'm looking for Bible Gateway, and sorry about all this. All these are tools. Social Evangelizer provides many tools for online apologetics. And so that's what you see. It opens up many applications, online tools, and browser-based resources. Even now, it opens up in AI. All browser-based, folks. I don't go into too much complexity. Let me just get all these things down. I know those are still in development. So we have the Bible Gateway here. So let's go to Genesis 1:1. I'm sorry. Actually, I wanted to just go into Genesis, but we'll read the full chapter here. I'll recenter that for you all so you can see that up close and personal. Sorry about that. Let me get this down. Okay, so what you have to look at is what God does here in the beginning. Look at what he does and pay attention, because this tells you what's up. So it tells you there. Okay. In verse 14, God proves that he has been teaching man from the beginning. And this is the evidence that God reveals his things, truths, to mankind through nature. It is the first communication of God. The basic it is one that everyone goes through every single day. Every morning that the sun rises in the morning, it is a communication of God to man, period. And the proof of that is here. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. And let them be for what? For signs. It's the first thing. What are signs? You know, some people want to interpret, these are the horoscope, the signs of the, what they call that, the horoscope, the calendar, this and that, blah, blah, blah. It says this, and for seasons, for days and years. But signs encompasses a lot of things. The basic concept that the word sign covers or addresses is that it is a what? A sign is what? At its basic reality, what is a sign? A sign is a communication. Signs are communication. when you go driving the car, you see a stop sign, right? When it's a yield sign, this communicates something to you, to the driver. And there are signs of this and that area. Like when spring is coming, you start seeing little green buds. That's a sign that spring is coming. So it's a communication. Okay? So that's what signs are at its basic core. Now, God is saying that He put things, the lights in heaven, remember, the lights in heaven are also galaxies. They're not just planets. And they're all not just stars. Sometimes it's a conglomeration of stars, like a galaxy. You see, it's a point of light in the heavens. But they were there to provide, to be for signs, and let them be for signs, for communicating. So there's a basis that the universe, science, is communication. It is the stuff of reality, but at the same token, it is communication. See? So this is an example that these cavemen, they must have been smoking something, right? But they got it right on the nail, because that shows you that what we can call just the sun in the sky, God is calling a sign. What we can call a galaxy so many light years away, God is calling it a sign, a communication. And the same thing then, like the universe is outside, that we look out outer space, when we also look inner space, we see the same conformity, right? You see the type of similarity from outer space to inner space. And so then what isn't communicated? Same thing in things. Matter also has its peculiarities that we all share, because we all matter also. So there is communication in all things. So to think that God only communicates like through spoken word to man, like He did in Mount Sinai, and did not speak to man or communicate to man before this, is ridiculous. Even just the events that the so-called myths are based on, what did we get from those events? The myth, the story, and later on the corrected form in the Bible. And so it still does not preclude God, because it is the same God that's communicated then, pre-myth, that established the myth, that the God that's communicated now by word and by the written word in the Bible, repeating or bringing that myth, so to speak, back, because it was actually the truth of the matter. And that's what the supposition of the Bible is. And so that the proof is that the scripture themselves point toward the fact that God has always spoken to man, always revealed truth to man. He built it in the way things are. It's just as simple as that. Okay, so let's get back into it. So all of that was intended to present the fact that if there is a God, He would be influencing, talking, communicating to one degree or another. And as the Bible says in chapter 1 of Genesis and verse 14, even through the signs in the natural things, in the signs of reality, even there is communication of God to man. Okay? So, therefore, it means that if God was talking, communicating He's not just talking, but communicating with man from the beginning. When would he have stopped? He can't, right? The communication is in the signs. So the signs is always there. The sun is always rising. The communication is always being had. When is the influence? When did the influence of God then not be part of the human development? When and how? It would always be. And so if something is impacting mankind since the beginning, we're basically evolved in it and through it, and probably from it, right? So some can argue that. Then, how will we tell? Because the question still remains: why is it the God of the Bible the true God? The question remains: then, how would that be manifest in the world today? How will we know who the true God is? If there was a God, how would we know which of these gods in history, or one that we haven't yet to discover, how would we know that this was in fact the true God, if there is a God? And like it says in Genesis 14, the communication from the beginning of time would mean, if God communicating, if the true God is communicating with man through signs, symbols, through nature, through science, what would be the result by now? The result you should expect is what? That most of humanity would have been impacted, shaped by the God, the true God, at minimum. Most people at this time, at this point in time, should have been shaped in some way by the God who created the heavens and the earth, by the God who put the signs in nature. And in fact, that nature itself is comprised of the signs that God has placed in it, has constructed our reality with. That would be, you would expect what? Almost total influence, wouldn't you? Almost total impact. If we're living day to day, having evolved even from a reality that was created by this creator, infused with communication, teaching, signs, as it says, for humanity, then by today, we should expect almost total influence, total construction or development of mankind under that influence, right? Or at least bringing us totally into a knowledge of that true God in one form or another. See, a lot of people say, show us God so we can believe in him. And the thing is, well, you're not looking right. You are not looking at the right things. God wouldn't show himself, face to face, because that doesn't help you. But you can reason that if there is a God, then, most of the people on the planet that he created, supposedly that he loves all these people, most of these people should be impacted by that God, especially one that claims to be the only one, the only one God who created the heaven and the earth. So we should expect that genius God would be able to communicate to all of man. We see that Genesis 1:14 says that he has done so, since the beginning through nature itself. 114, the signs. So he already created in the structure of the universe the communication to man. And again, that structure is not just in the skies; it's everywhere. It is nature. It is science itself. It is the stuff of nature that God has revealed Himself all the time. Not just revealing Himself, but teaching of man. He don't need to reveal Himself, but He needs to teach man, to develop man, to bring man up to the image and likeness, which He did in Genesis, that original state. That's what He's doing. That's it. Okay. All right. So let's look now at the facts. AI. Listen. So it says, I asked then, well, show me the percentage of all influence. So to estimate, the AI response, to estimate the total influence of the Torahric and New Testament God, including both active followers and broader cultural impact, we need to go beyond just religious affiliation. Here's a comprehensive breakdown. So here we have active followers, around 55%, includes Christians, Muslims, and Jews. So again, here we have that between all of us together, all of the three major religions, we are still almost half and half, but we're still winning. We're over the halfway mark at 55% from those who don't, okay? Who are not followers. Listen to that, who are not active followers. Very important here. Then it says cultural influence, legal, ethical, artistic. We have another 15 to 20%. So this includes secular societies shaped by Judeo-Christian values. That is in Europe and in the Americas. Okay? So that brings it up to another 20%, up to 75% of the human population is influenced either through active following or through cultural influence, which includes all things in life that are in part of a culture, part of a nation, etc., etc. Again, the things that God has caused to be. The communication, it all started with the signs, and it develops from there. So again, this is centered on one thing. But mind you, it's not just religion. It's just centered on the God of the Bible. You have to understand that. All right. And then we have indirect influence, but influence nonetheless, in terms of education, which is the reason God wanted Israel, by the way. It was to teach all the nation. Education. And I proved that in another teaching I had. You have to look at atheism, the beginning of atheism, and what happened when Israel failed. Something like that in the titles. Look for it on YouTube, TSPCI, and you'll get a wonderful historical panorama at how Israel affected or impacted the beginning of atheism, by the way. And what would have been different? Yeah, that's the title. What would have been different if Israel had not failed? So look at that. It's very interesting analysis. So anyway, so through education, literature, and philosophy, there is another 10 to 15%. Includes non-religious individuals, which I'm part of that group, not religious, but others would say, you are religious, stop it, right? Whichever. Again, if you're asking me, I tell you non-religious. If you're making a judgment, then you can call me religious. But includes non-religious individuals educated in or exposed to biblical narratives and ethics, okay? So, the total estimated influence is 80 to 90% of humanity. 80 to 90% of humanity. Okay. Really? What else is there to look at? I mean, where is the Hindu God here? Where is the Buddhist thing, And even the Buddhism has already been influenced by Christianity because they did that already. Okay? So today's Buddhist is very much influenced by Christianity because they did it back in the time. They did the damage back then. But in any case, even Buddhism has been impacted by Christianity. What other religions are there? You got the Indian, the Vishnu and all that type of things, the Persian religions out there. You have, again, other tribal religions and things like that. None of those things and none of those gods, even historical mythological gods like Baal and what is it, Malak, where we get milk from, and the Ashtaroth, where we get Easter from today, Eastereth. Again, it's just a goddess. What other Thor? Some of the Marvel characters are actual mythological gods. So what the other gods? What have the other gods? Have no power. They obviously have shown no power and no ability to influence humanity. None. Where are they? You understand? But there's only one God, the God of the Bible, the Abrahamic God, that has influenced humanity to the rate of 80 to 90%. To 90%. Which, if we were comparing the humanity to the fallen angels or to the angelic host, oh boy, Satan took with him, or they followed him, a third of the angelic host, a third of the angels in heaven. In human population terms, that would be, a third would be 33% of the population. Christianity, or the God of the Bible, better said, let's be clear. The God of the Bible has influenced, has reached 80 to 90%. That only leaves 10, 15, 20% tops of the population in the world not reached or influenced at all by the God of the Bible. And that's, again, I say at all, that's not true. Because if the lights in the heavens, and we'll go strictly to what the Bible says and not extrapolate. If the lights in the heaven is a sign, as it says, then everyone who is under the lights of the heaven has been influenced by the God of the Bible. Okay, so that's 100%. But we won't go there. We'll just go by what the AI can mathematically, substantively calculate. And that is 80 to 90%. The angels in heaven, the angelic host, 80 to 90% 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 80 77%. Okay. So here we are. Look at that. So there is almost, it's not a match. There are more human beings that have been influenced and are living under more of a influence from the God of the Bible than the percentile of angels in heaven that are, that were ever created. So right now, in terms of who is winning in this matter, humanity is more greater in terms of the percentile than the heavens who remain, than the angels in the heaven that remain faithful to God. That's pretty significant. That's pretty good. When you talk about a God, a perfect God, who created the angels perfectly, without all this flesh and material reality and all of that, and you're making a percentage correlation, God has done way better than the angels than he did with the angels. It's tight, it's close, but humanity is more impacted by the God of the Bible than the angels are, right, in their total percentage-wise speaking. Obviously, the number of angels must be astronomical. It has to be. But percentile speaking, God has done very good, very well at influencing, impacting humanity. So even the fact is that, when atheists understand something, when atheists understand that your belief is not correct, number one, based on your definitions, because they keep saying that God doesn't exist, and I keep saying, I agree with you. And God agrees with you. The Bible agrees with you. There's no, saying that God doesn't exist is not a thing. You're repeating what the Bible says. Congratulations. But I'm a Christian, and I'll tell you that. Because the word exist does not involve God at all. God created existence. Has nothing to do with God. That is our own word. That covers things that were created. Things that exist are things. And the Bible says that God is not a thing. He created all things. So I'm not going to get into the seminar. You'll have to watch the movie, documentary, Evidence for God, to understand what I'm talking about now. And by next week, I'll have the trailer, or the intro, really. It's an intro to it, to run as a commercial. I'll be doing that from now on until we release the part one, at least, of the Evidence for God documentary. 3 parts, just like the seminar was. So you'll begin to understand, what it is, why I say what I say. But think about this: how many atheists are there? Let's ask this question. That's a good question, right? And I'll end it with that question. Oh my goodness. That's the question. What percentile of the world's population considers themselves to be atheists? And then what percentile agnostic? Okay, I think we're covering it all, right? So I'm going to ask the AI for that information. Now, before this question, I had asked the AI about, I think it's called Prankton's principle, which is the 80-20 rule. And we'll cover that maybe next week. I won't go into that now. So what percentile of the world's population considers themselves to be atheists, and then what percentile agnostic? Agnostic means that they don't know enough to say if there is a God or there isn't one, right? So here we go. What does it say? Okay, atheists, 10%. Remember how much room that we have? We have that 80 to 90% of total human population that God has influence. God has, the God of the Bible has influence, has caused them to live within his rules, his ethics, his structures in relation to them, right? So now we find out that what comprises the other part. Who are the 10 to 20% that are not? And here we go. Here you see it. 10%, around 10%, people who explicitly reject belief in any deity. 10%. And then agnostics is another 10 to 15%. Hello? People who are uncertain or believe the existence of God is unknowable. Well, that's dumb. The existence of God is knowable. It is not, he does not exist. Simply, again, this is the problem of these words. The existence already tells you that has nothing to do with God. Using existence with God is a no-no. It has nothing to do with God. It is an error. It's a mistake. Okay, but you'll see the documentary, you'll learn. This has nothing to do with the Bible. It has to do with the Webster's Dictionary. Ding dong. Okay. Now, so there you go. 10 to 15%. Now, religiously unaffiliated. They call them nuns. And not N-U-N, but N-O-N. Now, they arrange about 30%. Includes atheists, agnostics, and those who say nothing in particular. So actually, between the religiously unaffiliated, you get to about that 30% mark. It pretty much matches the angels to perfection. So this is an alarming and interesting bit of information that AI has produced for us here. Okay, and you saw that last question was on the fly. I don't set these things, let's check it first. I set them up to save time during the broadcast, but here we did that atheist question just to see where do they fall, because 80 to 90% of the human population has been influenced and impacted by the God of the Bible. Then, okay, so we wanted to see where were the other guys. And remember that most of the atheists and agnostics, as I've just highlighted, are that because of misinformation and misunderstanding of the word and misuse. Even the AI is misusing it because it is a commonplace error. Okay? I'm telling you the way it is. Ex-East, it doesn't have nothing to do with God. And people using the word exist with God are totally wrong. Totally and unequivocally wrong. Okay? So you have everything, everybody saying it. Everything you'll see is exist because we have like no other word to say. But that doesn't mean that word is appropriate. What is appropriate with God is what the Bible says. The Bible doesn't say exist. As a matter of fact, the King James Bible was printed before the word exist existed. And even then, the concept of existence, as revealed by the dictionary, does not pertain to the God of the Bible, who says that he has created all things. Reality and existence are dependent on things. They're relevant only to things. You'll understand more once you see the documentary. But in any case, This is where we're at. There's certain regional, it says here that China, South Korea, Japan, obviously, because of their different cultural developments within their own society, the rates exceed. They're different because it's only there, but in the global, it's still what it is. But in certain areas, you do have a difference. So it can't be. Some people would say it can't be right what the AI is saying, because here in Japan, I mean, it's like half and half, right? Because that's there in Japan. The questions we asked was globally, including Japan and everywhere else all together. What is the number, right? So obviously you're going to have patches that are higher, lower, etc., of course. But we're asking for the global percentile, and this is what the responses were. And here we see that even with the atheists and agnostics and the I don't want to hear anything about anything, that 30 totally is like 30%. It's still, and the fact that the agnostics are wrong in the issue of existence, and that the atheists are also wrong in the issue of existence. What that means is that atheists and agnostics, in terms of the question we posed before, can't be included. In other words, they have to be included and add to the 80 to 90%. Because in fact, they are not against God. They are not against God, they're just confused. They are not understanding what the word exist means. And so, and the original use of that word, not now. Now everyone's using exist for everything. It's not correct. So, if the atheists and agnostics are mistaken in their, if they're using the word and understanding and reasoning with the word existence as being part of their main mortar to their belief system, then if they were Christian, if they were Jewish before, or even Islamic, they're still in that number. And so the real number of people in the world influenced and impacted by the God of the Bible would be well over 90%, and even reaching 95%. And in scientific terms, that is near perfection. And that is really called, what is that called? It calls it proof. When you get up to that range, 95, 99%, right? 99.5% is pretty much pure, right? It's not total purity, but it's pretty much there. So 95% is pretty much total. Not completely. Not completely, but it's astonishingly replete. So, could it be for the God? How could it be Zeus? Could Zeus be the God? The true God? Could Baal be the true God? They've been asleep at the wheel. If they're the true God, they've been asleep, man. They are sleeping. Because right now, what we see is the evidence of the one true God being the God of the Bible. If there is a God, that God is the God of the Bible. And this planet is all been impacted, influenced by the God of the Bible. And that's a wrap. Okay? God bless you all. Hope this was enlightening for you. Don't be afraid of AI. Learn to use it and to understand, how to ask the right questions and how to reason. If you can't reason, AI is a danger for you because it will take you off on a... You have to know what to ask. And basically, my advice to everyone is to make it into the math. Keep it as close to math as you can. And you know what? The other problem that most people don't like math. You see, but this is where things matter. This is why there's so many false religions, so much stupidity on the planet. Because you guys hate math. You hate math. You don't want to do the math. But the math is the surefire proofing method of everything. Most science is proven by math. You need the math, folks. So don't hate math. You hate math, you hate the truth. Because mathematics is the language of truth. So you need to know your math and love math and be able to reason and help the AI help you. AI can do a lot of good for you, but you need to know math. Because you need to be able to say, hey, listen, let's stick as close as possible. Let's ask a question that goes as close as possible to the math as possible to establish what the truth of a thing is. Okay? And remember that there's other things you have to realize, like just the fact that in Japan it's 50-50, that doesn't mean that the rest of the world is 50-50, right? And it doesn't mean that the total of the human population is 50-50. You can't have a myopic eyesight in terms of data and research. You have to be able to look at the global scale and not just local, because locally things will vary greatly, right? It's like the political map. More Republicans here, few Democrats, more Democrats there, less Republicans there. That's the way it is. It doesn't mean there's no Republicans there where the Democrats have all their votes from. It just means there are more Democrats than there are Republicans, but they're still there. Same thing in these issues. There's not everyone is not an unbeliever. There may be places where there's 50-50, 30-70, other numbers in a certain place on an island, nation, or whatnot. But that has nothing to do with the global perspective. All right? So that's that for today. So take care. Watch out for the documentary. We'll start playing the trailers next week. And I'll see you again another time. Take care and God bless you.